The glass of water touched a paper was exactly 4:45 p.m. My sister Emma didn't spill it. She meant it. She leaned over my 6-year-old son, Lucas, holding the glass as if observing a clock, as if the time had come. Lucas had been working on that painting for 3 days. The lake view outside our parents' camp house, made by hand, without a ruler, carefully choosing the colors. It was to be a gift for his grandfather. Now, a dark red liquid has swept through the blue sky, wetting and curling the paper, turning his labor of love into a wet pile of rubbish. You need to stop this kid being obsessed with those ridiculous drawings, Emma said, her voice slightly murmuring but calm. He's occupying the head of the table. Lucas needed his confidence shattered. She continued in a dry tone. The world isn't looking at his drawings. He needs to be tougher. The glass on the damp paper, with a wet popping sound. Then he glanced around the room for confirmation. Sergeant Ray, sitting there, tapped his knees. Ma'am, this is a 50-pound lesson, kid. Get tough or you'll get swallowed. The murmuring began. It quickened into a sharp, ugly sound. My mother chuckled nervously, trying to keep the peace light. My cousins grinned. Lucas? He looked at the wreckage of the painting, his little hands trembling. I didn't yell. For the first few seconds, I didn't even breathe. I watched my son. Lucas didn't make a sound. His shoulders swayed, his face flushed, but he didn't cry. He bit his lip until it turned white, squeezing himself into the chair, trying to shrink so much he would disappear. Comfort wasn't what he was looking for. He wanted invisibility. Waiting until the rose bush stopped, he hoped that if he remained silent, the hunter would lose interest. And in that silence, I saw it. An invisible chain wrapped around his neck. The same chain. The chain I've worn for 32 years. Be quiet. Be compliant. Swallow my anger. Don't disturb the peace. I knew this chain as well as I knew anything about it, because I had worn it for years. And now to see that same chain sliding into my son's neck, it's horrible. My whole body froze. That he wasn't just describing what was happening in the moment, but translating my son's legacy of trauma. I was passing through a hereditary disease of silence. Before the door closed, before its outer boundaries were defined, before it was completely over, he would carry this for the rest of his life. He would learn to live in a world that occupied space, where he had to bury his own needs, for the sake of his dependence and the comfort of those around him. It was supposed to be mine. The truth hit me like a physical blow, cold and firm. I looked at my father, Michael. He was sitting at the head of the table, his hands clasped over his empty plate. His face was like stone, indifferent to the fact that no one recognized him. But I recognized him. I saw how his fingers had turned white where he gripped the fork, the twitching of the muscles in his jaw. The air in the cabin grew heavy, electrically charged. 30 years of unspoken words. I stood up. The chair was pulled across the wooden floorboards with a screeching sound, making a loud scratch that cut through the rosewater like a knife. I didn't go to clean the table. She didn't ask for a towel. I walked away with Emma. I positioned myself directly between Lucas and her. I blocked my daughter's view with my body. I didn't look at the wine. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I had no impulse to fix anything. I didn't want to soften the edges, to lighten the air. I felt a sharp, audible clarity as the bridge burned. Not anger, accountability. No loan. It's been paid. You like this, I said. My voice wasn't loud, cold, mechanical. You liked a 6-year-old creating something, then you liked destroying it. Emma, rolling her eyes at the glass she'd just looked at, scanned the apparatus for more wine. Her movements were loose, haughty. Oh, Vivian, don't dramatize. Paper, she said. I made it for its own good, rather than being so useless. Helpful. I repeated the word, the metallic taste in my mouth. Silence fell icy. Emma's grin began to fade, the glass freezing halfway down her throat, and took a short breath to avoid panicking. I didn't move. Now Suze wasn't a chef. Managing tickets is about smooth flow. A mother watching over a hunter. I stopped negotiating. I looked at my father again. Michael didn't move, but his gaze shifted from his spot on the table and landed on me. I wanted to say something, but my mother Susan was dragging something behind the counter. But she didn't go to Lucas. She didn't hug the crying child. She grabbed a handful of napkins and started frantically wiping the wine off the table. Oh, Emma, how clumsy you are, she shrieked. her voice loud and strained, vibrating with frantic energy. Sarah, don't crumple it up. It was an accident. We can get him a coloring book. A nice one, with stickers. She looked at us, her grin very faint, her eyes pleading. Let's just have a nice dinner, please. Labor Day. Family. I watched her, and the pain I normally felt evaporated. My mother isn't shocked. She's not desperate. She's addicted. Addicted to the illusion of a happy family. Willing to pay any price to hold on to it, but never paying the price herself. He's imposing taxes on us. On good children. Quiet children. On children who don't scream. Cutting back on our value in order to protect his humanity. Yes, Emma said, emboldened by my mother's intervention, leaning back and stirring her wine. It's very gentle. Vivian treats it like a baby. I'm doing it for its own good, to prepare it for the real world. The last thread snapped. Michael rose to his feet, not quickly, slowly, silently, like the eventual collapse of an old building. He walked to the mantelpiece, where a plaque read "Family Forever," inscribed in calligraphic lettering. He glanced at it for a second. Then he turned his face to Susan. You wiped the table, he said. His voice was dangerously low, like thunder before a storm. You didn't check on the child. You worried about the wood stain. Susan froze, a wine-soaked napkin in her hand. David, don't be dramatic. Just... Michael interrupted. You're trying to maintain peace, he said. But there's no peace, only silence. And I've stopped paying for it. He lowered his left hand, his golden wedding ring, narrow, embedded in his flesh. He'd worn it for 40 years. She walked to the kitchen washer, wet her fingers with dish soap, and began to take it off. It was painful to watch. She pulled and twisted, her face squeezed, until the ring wouldn't slip over the joint. She returned to the table. She held the ring over Lucas's painting, which was soaked in wine. She released it. It fell onto the wet paper, splashing red droplets onto the white tablecloth. I stopped keeping your peace, he said, and I stopped protecting you. The silence wasn't emptiness in the room, it was absorbing. Susan looked at the ring. It was sitting in the wine, in her hand as if a garnet had fallen from it. Emma let out a sharp, irritated laugh. Dad, have you gone senile? Divorcing Mom over this coloring book? Pathetic. Michael didn't look at her, and didn't look at him. She walked to the travel bag in the corner. She pulled out a thick black leather-bound notebook. It looked old, its spine cracked, its edges worn. She returned to the table and laid it down with a heavy throw. I've been a structural engineer for 40 years, he said, his voice calm, yet terrifying. Tracing disease fractures is my job. Finding the cracks before buildings collapse. I track the decay. He opened the book. The pages were filled with neat, thin, meticulous columns of dates and numbers. 3 years ago, she traced the first page with her finger. You told me I needed $5,000. You said my content creation career was taking off. I needed new equipment. Emma clutched her arms, her eyes rolling. Yes. And I was paying back most of it. Is this an audit? You didn't pay a single penny, Michael said. But that's not the point. The point is, I started tracking. Not just the big loans, everything, every time your mother needed extra cash for food. Every penny that came out when home repairs were needed. When they never had a finished house. Every penny deducted from a joint savings account. From emergencies. The book so that Emma and Susan could see it. Columns. Translator, date. Amount. I kept track of the dates. I kept track of the amounts. Then I hired a forensic accountant to track where the money went. Susan said in a small, muffled voice. He reached out his hand, trembling. Michael, please don't do this. Not in front of everyone. Everyone needs to know, Michael said. Because everyone laughed at Sarah. Everyone laughed at Lucas. Everyone thinks they're weak. But they're not weak. They're the ones paying the bill. They're the ones paying the price. He looked at me, his eyes filled with deep, painful apology. I let it happen. I let Sarah think of him as less than her. I thought she was special. You just existed. But I was watching. I was counting. He turned the page. The bank transfer receipts were taped. This isn't an allocation, Emma, he said. This is a ransom. Michael looked down at the notebook, his finger tracing a line of red ink. August 14. 2 years ago. $12,000. You said it was for buying a brand partnership. April 3rd last year. 8,000. You said it was for medical bills, but the biggest one was 3 years ago. The night of the Labor Day party. The party we didn't go to because you said you were sick, Susan. Susan shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. Michael, stop. Please. Protect the name. Michael's voice rose, a fury that broke. A fury he shouldn't have heard. His name isn't Guardian. He's Guardian of Criminal Affairs. He turned the page. No receipt. A copy of the police report taped. $74,000, Michael said. Not for business loans. Not for gifts. It was money to silence people. Emma froze. Her haughty expression vanished, replaced by pure terror. She looked at the door but didn't move. 3 years ago, Michael said to the room. Emma was driving home from a drinking party. She was hit by a parked car. Then she hit a pedestrian down the road. A 19-year-old girl. She was walking her dog. I gasped. The room spun. I remember that. Emma had traveled for a month and told us she had found herself in Europe. She never stopped. He left the stage. Michael continued. Run. Susan cries into her hands, her body rocking back and forth. You took our pension, Michael said, his voice trembling. The business money, our assets. You hired a lawyer to bury him. You paid the girls' families to keep him out of civil court. You paid the auto repair shop to remove the dent. You told me it was a parking dispute. You said it was over. He slammed the book. His voice shot up like an explosion. You stole our future to cover up his crime. Then you left him sitting at this table, scorning a 6-year-old for drawing. You let him destroy his work because you taught him that destruction has no consequences. At Emma, she didn't sparkle. Her mouth dropped open like a fish. You're not a manager, Emma. You're not a content creator. You're an obligation. And your mother has been accused. The silence was heavy, suffocating. The sound of the family legend dying. Emma studied the map. She got up, adjusted her expensive dress, trying to compose herself after 33 years of arrogance. She glanced at the notebook, looked at Michael, sneered. So, she spat? It was an accident. My mom helped. That's what they do. Moms help. Not like you. She looked at Michael. Her jaw was high. Just jealous. Mom loves me more. I don't want your money. I have a president. I have followers. Still, I don't want this old hut. Michael looked at her with cold, detached pain. Not a father watching over a girl. A prisoner watching over a structure. An engineer. He reached into his back pocket for a notebook, documented on the outside. It remained standing darkly on the table. Beside him, the abandoned ring and the falsified picture. This cabin is in my name, he said, sliding the paper straight across. Inherited from my father. Your mother isn't on the deed. You have 1 hour to vacate the room. Everyone, including Susan. I'm listing you to sell. First thing in the morning, to get our pension back. You can't get us out. Susan cried, her hands clasped to her chest. It's raining. Where am I going? I don't know. Michael said, his voice devoid of emotion. Maybe stay with the girl you invested in. To Emma. For your own money. We froze the joint accounts that I just froze 10 minutes ago. I reported business fraud, pending a criminal investigation. The bank locked everything. Credit cards. Your mother's cards. The business account where the money flowed. Emma snatched a phone. Her fingers darted across the screen frantically. The banking app clicked. She pressed her face against it. Rejected, she whispered. And there, the illusion of an empty wallet vanished. I watched my shrinking sister, the mullah, the golden boy, his success story. Without the financial drip, his status, his self-confidence, his personality evaporated like pure air. She wasn't a strong woman, a child in costume. A costume she hadn't bought with her own money. Her strength was never real. She was hired, and the rental period ended. The power has been hired, Michael said, echoing my thoughts. And the landlord is shutting down the building. He walked to the front door and opened it wide. Outside, the storm had replicated and turned into raindrops, turning the dirt road into mud. The wind howled warmly inside the cabin. Get out! Emma looked at Sergeant Ray, who had laughed earlier. She ran away from him, suddenly fascinated by the floorboards. She looked at Susan. Susan was just crying, useless and broken, unable to save anyone, not even herself. Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were wide and filled with tears. A sudden, desperate realization. Alone. Sarah, she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Tell him he's crazy. You can't let him do this to me. I'm your sister." I looked at her, the woman who had been ruining me for 30 years. Regarding the silence my son learned, "I condemn it. You need to speed up," I said, my voice as cold as the rain outside. "The traffic is going to be terrible." As the process unfolds, the emotional impact of the events becomes more pronounced. Initially, people try to make sense of everything, but their minds resist. Thoughts circle around the same points, lacking clarity. This creates inner exhaustion, which eventually manifests in behavior. The silence becomes heavier and takes on a new meaning. The pace of the narrative slows down with this heaviness. Each scene carries more emotion than the last. The viewer feels this intensity, and the story progresses with this emotional depth. 6 months later, the new apartment's light was different. Not the dim, yellow light of the old cabin. Not the harsh, fluorescent glow of the old family home. It was white and clean, streaming through large windows overlooking the city park. It was smaller than the house Michael had shared with Susan for 40 years. But it was peaceful. There's no reason to walk here. There's no heavy silence coming from the other room. No fear of the next explosion. I sat in the courtyard, leaning against the wall, watching them. Michael knelt beside Lucas on a drop of cloth. Both were covered in sawdust. Michael was teaching him how to use a miter box to cut a wooden frame for a custom canvas. "You have to measure twice, Lucas," Michael said, his voice soft, patient, the voice of a man who no longer had to shout. "Sensitivity is important. If the framework is strong, the art is safe." "Like this, Grandpa?" Lucas sawed carefully, his tongue sticking out in focus. "Exactly. My mother, Susan, lived in a different city from Michael and me, 2 towns apart. If she sometimes sent letters, they were incredibly long, expensive letters on expensive paper. She accused us of destroying the family image. I was shaming her in church. Cruel. I'm leaving before the first line of the ledger passes. She was trying to impose a tax on us for the piece that didn't yet exist. But we had stopped paying it." Emma worked at a shopping mall, selling cell phone cases. A fraud investigation had triggered a tax audit, and she was drowning in legal fees. She had to sell her car. She moved into a studio apartment. For the first time in 33 years, she was facing a life without a safety net. And the fall was sharp. At Lucas, he wasn't terrified anymore. He wasn't hiding under the table. He was mixing glue and wood, laughing when he spilled a tiny bit of glue. It didn't freeze. He just grabbed a cloth and cleaned it up, not panicking if anyone yelled at him. I understood the price was high. He had to break up the family to save the people. He had to burn the structure down to save the foundation. A heavy price. But looking at Michael's slumped shoulders, at Lucas's easy, unburdened smile, this was the best bargain I'd ever made. That night, Michael worked as a cook. He was teaching his apprentice how to crush someone in the kitchen. He did funny things, told a story about his friend Laurent. The master and his apprentice beat each other up in the kitchen, all because of a drop of marinara. Lucas laughed until he broke down. Normally, I wouldn't see Michael like this. In the old house, every night at the table, his chest buried, the silent man, quiet, his head itching with pain. He kept his notebook secret, counted every transfer, watched every betrayal, and told no one. He absorbed it all like a sponge and remained silent. The discovery of the notebook, not the technology, but the news, was the salvation. Throughout the process, decision-making becomes increasingly difficult. Each option carries a new uncertainty. This uncertainty preoccupies the mind. Thoughts remain unclear. The narrative doesn't conceal this complexity. On the contrary, it centers around it. Because reality is often unclear, this reality adds depth to the story. The viewer senses this honesty and becomes more engaged with the narrative. The following week, I went to see my own apartment. Smaller, quieter, without Susan crying and tying her up. She opened the door, her eyes swollen with redness. She was still grieving their marriage, their life, their identity. "What happened?" I asked, before entering the door. "Does it matter?" Her voice was fragile. "Are you worried?" I wasn't worried. An old married woman sitting in an empty apartment, staying there and being condemned, accused. There was no sadness for me, just distance. "You should stop writing letters," I said. "I don't want you to want to hear my voice." I closed the door. Emma was easy to find. She was wearing an orange vest, showing off her phone to people who recognized her. Nobody recognized her. She wasn't a social media influencer wearing sunglasses. She was a girl who had broken up with an unpaid bill. I arrived without any check-in. There wasn't even a glance he knew it was me. Vivian. There was something in her voice, despair, dishwashing. Have you talked to your father, Ick? Could there be something going on inside? The lawyers say. No, I said. I walked away. His job, it was restricted. The following month, Michael's lawyer sent me a letter, an official document, a decision to reclaim 60% of the pension funds from the business. The remaining 35% was to be split between Susan and Emma, because the court had seen the existence of the marriage. But nothing went to Emma. No opportunity. No family trust fund. No compensation. Clean cut. According to Michael's lawyer, the sale was finalized 2 years later. The cabin was gone. Michael found a smaller place around Cairo, just with a hood, hedges instead of grass. He and Lucas started growing things in the garden. Pomelo trees, tomato plants, basil. They designed the garden together, setting aside time each day for mowing the lawn, for hunting garden forage. As a professional engineer, Michael's job also changed. Following the divorce, despite the stressful situation, he took on fewer projects, less travel, but more time at home. And Lucas had balance. One day, Lucas came to school and said he'd won an award in class. Canvas painting. The teacher put him on the path to the final result. As Michael's eyes welled up, he knew this kid now had a soul, not something broken, a whole child. Susan's letters stopped coming so frequently. At first, once a month, then once every 2 months, then never. Perhaps she learned that if you don't admit you've done something wrong, there's no going back. Or perhaps it's just too painful. It's easier to live a family legend, even a false legend, than to face the truth. Emma's the story was different. The fraud case dragged on. Legal fees are settled. Penalties have been determined. Resignation. He was convicted to repay 40% of the borrowed money. For years, he quit the retail business and started working as a waiter in a coffee shop. With condemnations, failures, and anonymity, the social media accounts were shut down. The followers never existed. The stories were sales. The advertising was speed. The sponsorships. Nothing was real. And with the last of the real money gone, the whole illusion crumbled. Throughout the process, decision-making becomes increasingly difficult. Each option carries a new uncertainty. This uncertainty preoccupies the mind. Thoughts remain unclear. The narrative doesn't conceal this complexity. On the contrary, it centers around it. Because reality is often unclear, this reality adds depth to the story. The viewer senses this honesty and becomes more engaged with the narrative. One day about a year later, I saw her downtown, her head uncovered. No makeup. She was grumpy. She had a boyfriend, the kind I didn't know, neutral, cautious, not very pleasant. He walked past quickly. He didn't look at me. Maybe he didn't recognize me. Or maybe he chose to ignore me. I don't care. The world he warned me about was no longer relevant to mine. The return began in a way that suggested it wouldn't happen. During the first week in the apartment, while rummaging through Michael's old things books, notebooks, maybe again, I found a photograph. Michael and Susan, 25 years ago, on their honeymoon, laughing, hugging, thinking of each other. Looking at it, I wondered who they had become to each other. Where did they go wrong? When did Michael start to become a nuisance? Susan stopped hearing what she heard, and Emma never learned to lose? Instead of seeing it unburned, I held it in my hand. For a minute, then I let go. These questions aren't the answers. Just yawning, closed doors. I knew that when some things break, they're never the same again. They're not repaired. They're just made differently. The structure, in a brick world, becomes stone. Michael's notebook, his handwriting, that account, it was now our document. A story of liberation. A memory of the breaking of the chains. When a father finally defends himself. When the child no longer suffers. The mother who gave words to silence. We got a shelf in the library and put it there. Not locked up. Just there. Sometimes Lucas would pick it up and flip through the pages. He'd ask, "Why does Grandpa write numbers?" And Michael would answer, "Simple. Clean. Because numbers don't lie, Lucas. Numbers always tell a story. There was a definite sound instantly. The right sound. Then I realized Michael wasn't retreating back to his old layers. When he opened the notebook, the pain wasn't there. There was historicity. There was structure as he broke the silent sentences, movement, purpose. Perhaps the act of writing it was therapeutic. One day, Lucas and I played with the foam. The park, the sun, the trees. Michael was mowing the lawn, sometimes just standing and watching. There was an expression on his face, I'm not sure what to call it. Not unhappiness, not much. Just peace. Inner peace, perhaps. Like a man who has escaped the silence, finding his voice. Mama, Lucas called, running, telling her to wash the foam. Look, sunlight fell through his hair, his eyes wide open, fearless. I was afraid to experience this. A child's simple moments of joy. No fear or pressure. Just foam and sunshine and Grandpa's laughter at the garden's harvest. I picked it up, lifted it, and spun it around. It laughed. This wasn't peace, it was long before. Peace isn't the best time. Peace was compassion. Peace was a life without wrong. Peace was the courage, something most people never have to. Step outside your shell and break down for another. The pages of Michael's notebook were in red ink, calculations, omissions, decay. But this page, this moment, in Lucas's arms, these pages were unwritten. These pages are being lived. He was making choices, day by day, saying no to silence, saying no to contempt, saying no to chains. That night, after Lucas's sleep period, Michael and I sat on our balcony. The city lights twinkled below. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to talk about. We just sat side by side, witnessing the storm that had come, the peace that remained, doing nothing between breaking and building, just watching. It was worth it, Michael finally said. Yes, I said. It was worth it. I have no regrets. Me neither. It's as if he said it so easily, but he knows what it means. He lost his daughter. He lost his wife. He lost his home, but he lost it all to be free. He lost the weight of the chains. It was worth it. That morning, after dropping Lucas off at school, I went back to Michael's notebook. It was open to the final pages. His handwriting had changed in the later entries, heavier, blue ink instead of red. Rule. Order. Closed book. The last line is alone. Sensitivity is important. If the framework is strong, the art is safe. Lucas knows that now. Sarah knows that now. Susan and Emma needed to learn that. And I taught them. I closed the notebook. I put it back on the bookshelf. Unlocked. Open. Arrival. Reality. A man's signature, finally, had lifted the notebook to a balloon, not silence, but clarity. On the balcony, the light changing from morning to evening, Lucas prepared a masterpiece of a canvas frame, with red lines, the child's paint. Michael's architect's hands piece. The things to be hung on the wall are ready to acquire color and value. Is the story of saving this foundation. The man who broke the silence, the mother who broke the chains, and the rescued child simply alive, simply safe. Every new development connects with the past. These connections create a mental burden. People struggle to carry this burden. The narrative clearly shows this struggle. Emotions are not suppressed. They are conveyed as they are. This openness gives the story sincerity. The audience notices this sincerity. The connection strengthens, and the narrative deepens. 2 years later, there was no invitation to Lucas's 9th birthday party. I might have expected one from Michael, or even Susan, but Emma never considered. She didn't even know the address. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. The distance between them had become an insurmountable mountain, not just physical, but spiritual. The party itself was simple. The park, pizza, friends. Lucas's new friends, his school friends, safe kids, fearless kids. Michael sat in the park, his eyes always on Lucas. He wasn't paranoid anymore, just attentive, present. Here. There was nowhere he couldn't go, nowhere he wasn't watching. What surprised me was how Michael had changed. Not physically, still the same face, the same gray hair, the same cracked hands. But inside, he exuded calmness, lightness. The old Michael, that heavy, tense man, clinging tightly to the world, was gone, completely gone. One night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Michael sat in the kitchen while I had some tea. Outside the window, the city lights were slowly fading. The August air was hot, sticky. The kind that makes you uncomfortable. I have some news from Susan, I said. Michael looked up. Nada expressed look, curiosity. What? Therapy has started. She's seeing a therapist. Once a week. Silence. Michael took a sip of his tea, not looking at the front. Good, he said. He's fine. The reason she loves him is so she can understand him a little better. Are you suppressing it? I asked. To yourself or to him or her? What? Michael looked up. Am I suppressing it? No, it's not consolation. It's reality. People can change, Vivian. Slowly. Painfully. But they can change. Susan, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe her efforts are a start. I had never seen Michael so generous before. Though, I knew why. Michael himself had changed his mistakes, his silence, my defending Emma, all of this had compelled him to forgive himself. If you can't forgive yourself, it's hard to forgive anyone else. That weekend, I got a call from Michael's lawyer. Official paperwork. Emma had finished paying off her legal debts, fines, and restoration. 8 years of monthly payments, watching every single play, but she was done. Her book was clean. I knew she wasn't working, but at least she was finished. When Michael told me this, he just nodded. Okay, he said. Good. Nothing more. It's not a celebration. It's not a victory. Just okay. Another chapter has closed. That same month, Lucas's art teacher called me. Lucas had been selected for the school art show his work was going to be exhibited. Special commissioner. When I told Michael, I knew it when his eyes welled up. This boy was now speaking through art, without silence, without fear, just color, shape, meaning. The exhibition arrived at night. In the gallery, with his drawings lining the wall, Lucas's was hung in the center landscape, lake, trees, sky, with unreal colors, fantastic colors, purple sky, pink trees, blue water, the color of a child's soul. His soul was now on the wall. I stopped for Michael. He was looking, acting as if he were bowing his head to the drawing. There's something in it. I know it from a moment ago. Yes. The red in the notebook. Is this the price of being? Non-physical things? To see your child's unworthy spirit developing free? Yes. A million times yes. Susan came for the show. It was the first time in 4 years she'd seen Michael face to face. She started to cry when she saw Lucas. She whined. She approached Michael, searching for words of apology. But Michael only shook his head. Lucas, see this, he said. Your soul hasn't touched that child enough. Susan recoiled slowly for a moment. She had to process what Michael had said. Yes. This wasn't punishment, it was redemption. It wasn't a cure for the heartbreak of bad mothers. Lucas is safe. Lucas is making art. Lucas is alive. Nothing else matters. After the show, Michael took Lucas outside. Me, Sergeant Ray, yes. We still saw each other occasionally, but a better version, full of questions. And a couple of friends were at the restaurant. We had supper. Lucas, with a small achievement badge on his head, gold and smiling. He didn't know exactly what this night was for, but maybe he did. Maybe he knew that it wasn't just art. The atmosphere had changed. The family atmosphere had changed. After dinner, I went back to the old house. Yes, still empty. Publicly known, after Michael sold it. If it weren't real, spirits would come to a sold house. But I went. I don't know why. Maybe just to remember. Maybe to say goodbye. He crouched in the rain at night. The sound of dripping water from the roof made him laugh. Inside the house, there was no sound. Alone, in my parents' old room. The bed was gone. The firewood gone. By the window, it was wiped clean and empty. But in his memory, the afternoon light was still there. Michael sitting, his ring unbroken, his marriage unbroken. Downstairs, into the living room. The fireplace is empty. The rustic board is gone. Family forever inscription, now hung on another wall. In another house, by another family. Perhaps that inscription brought peace to other people. Perhaps another father, reading it, decided to break his own chains. I don't know. That's just how times are. The cracks are spreading. I heard the footsteps of the sound developing against the front door blade. Nobody was there. Just the wind. A door opening, closing, when nobody else is home. I went outside into the rain, back to the car. I sat in the car for a minute in silence. The house window, dim and empty, reflected in the mirror. With the driver, I got back to Michael on the way. When he illuminated it, Lucas, he was sitting in the room, drawing at his desk. Even after his time, he was still creating. Could anything stop this boy? Michael had watched his standing, guiding, tangential hair. His eyes, appreciation. Just appreciation. How? Michael asked. It's empty, I said. But okay. Okay. Michael understood. No further explanation was needed. The next morning, after Lucas went to school, Michael told me we had to go for a walk. Just the two of us. We walked through the park, like where Lucas used to play, like where Michael used to keep an eye on him. There was no visibility at all. Then we sat by the river. The water was flowing, calm gray. About Emma? Michael asked. Have you heard anything? No, I said. You? Something, she said. From the lawyer. I found his address. Apartment old section. If a girl wants to visit, should I tell him? I thought about it. Emma. Who could she be now? A waitress, a customer, going home and sitting, living, just living a little. Maybe better, maybe worse, maybe still suffering. No, I said finally. Let him go his way. Our path is over. Hers isn't starting. Michael nodded. Agreement. I sat with him, looking at the river, not saying much, because sometimes the things that aren't said are the deepest. Agreement, not celebration, just peace. In October, Michael gave up official work, complete retirement. After emptying out the house and finding a smaller place, what did he need for the money he earned? A garden, Lucas, art frames, gardens, light, not accounting life. One day, Lucas and Michael went to the home repair depot. They picked up supplies, both of them, in the middle of the morning. Loaded up lawnmower oil, crimped cement, nails. When I saw Michael, there it was, that frame. Lucas's architectural detail, the boy's creative passion. A father, sensitive, learned that a child's safety is as important as anything else. It was impossible to erase it, because Michael's definition had changed. During Christmas, Lucas was writing a well-crafted letter to Michael, to Santa, to Grandpa, a translator of love. Michael read his book, laughed through his tears. This is the most beautiful love letter I've ever written, he said. No one has ever written one. Inside, Lucas had said he thanked the fact that the redness in the dark tea had stopped, that he hadn't broken the parties, that he had passed the hearing of the silence, that he had looked beyond the fear. Because the frame was strong, the art was safe. Michael suggested framing it. In February, the doorbell rang. When Michael opened it, Emma stopped, thin, captive, her eyes downcast. She looked at Michael silently. Hello, Emma said. I wanted to see Lucas. I just wanted to see him. Michael held silence for a minute. That voice, he said, echoed over Lucas's painting of July. Come, he said then. But if you don't speak, he won't listen. This is yours. Emma came in. Lucas, playing games, looked around. He turned to recognize her. My aunt. I know her. But I don't know her. Hello, Lucas, Emma said, her voice fragile. I wanted to see you because at one time, I was bad, very bad. And I pasted your picture, but I asked about you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Lucas, I've worked on this. The architect is complicated. The kid is smart, terribly knowledgeable, probably terribly well known. Okay, Auntie, she said then, with childlike seriousness. It's happened by now. Now. Emma started to cry, real crying, shaking all over her body. Michael sat beside her, saying nothing. He just sat there. Lucas, with his incredible empathy, the child's incredible empathy, put himself close. He gently tapped his aunt on the shoulder. This wasn't salvation, but it could be a beginning. This wasn't peace, but it could become a way out. Most people never get here. This scene of comforting conversation, it's not that simple. It doesn't last that long, because it's not that clean. But sometimes if the child has learned, life is simple at the beginning, they can forgive. That night, after Emma laughed, I looked at Michael. Are you all right? I asked. I don't know, Michael said. And for the first time he was being completely honest. But Lucas saw it. Lucas did it. Lucas chose to forgive, or not to. And he chose from his wrinkle. Maybe Emma too slowly is choosing to forgive herself, Maybe. As the night progressed, Michael and I went into the garden. The garden had grown flowers, plants, a living space. Michael and Lucas had finished it together. This perhaps is the real framework, a strong foundation. Art in this case, life is safe. Don't you have any regrets? I asked Michael. Every day, he said. Every day. A little regret. Years lost. Wasted with Susan. No reaction to Emma too late. But regret, perhaps, isn't the price. Perhaps the price is choice. I chose to break. I chose to save. I chose today to be reborn. That was worth it. Regret is what remains only. Last autumn, Lucas planted new seeds in the garden. Winter's harshness, the grass arrived. Spring sprout, the weeds spent. Michael's garden, season after season, was lived. He controlled the power, delicateness, frame, art. I found that I had learned. A minute is long. In any case, life structure is valued by people who have their lives. The expected price, the ending was going on, is valued. Michael broke the silence. But Lucas didn't live, and perhaps this difference was created. As this story concludes, it becomes clearer that what has been recounted is more than just a series of events. Every experience, every silence, and every inner rupture takes on a new meaning over time. Emotions that initially feel overwhelming help one to understand oneself as the journey progresses. What has happened cannot be changed, but its impact on life can be reshaped. This reshaping is not sudden. It progresses slowly, silently, and often imperceptibly. In this process, one not only remembers but also learns to establish a new balance within one's inner world. As time passes, perspective naturally changes. Emotions that once seemed difficult to bear are now positioned as part of the past. This doesn't mean forgetting. On the contrary, it represents the strength to accept what happened as it was. As it is accepted, emotions become more balanced. The mind doesn't constantly dwell on the same points. Silence ceases to be an uncomfortable void and transforms into a space where thoughts become clearer. The point reached at the end of the story is not a moment of triumph where everything is resolved. It is more of an internal pause. At this pause, one can stop without forcing oneself. One can look at the past without completely turning one's back on it, but also without getting lost in it. What happened is no longer what governs, but merely a part of the narrative. This realization creates an inner relief. The emotions that have accumulated throughout the narrative slowly dissolve here. Each scene has left a trace. These traces are indelible, but they lose their weight over time. People learn to move forward with these traces. They become more understanding of themselves. They readjust their expectations. They accept that life doesn't always offer clear answers. At this point, the story feels more like a pause than an ending. It creates space to catch your breath. It offers the opportunity to look at what happened from a distance. This distance clarifies thoughts. Emotions become more orderly. One begins to hear their own inner voice more clearly. Every narrative leaves a different impression on the viewer. This story, too, opens up space for thought rather than providing answers. Because some narratives exist not to explain, but to evoke feelings. The impact they leave far outweighs words. They merge with the viewer's own experiences. They generate new meanings. And perhaps that's where the real value lies. When the story ends, what remains isn't emptiness, but awareness. This awareness allows one to get a little closer to oneself. The connection with the past changes. The outlook on the future becomes calmer. The journey continues, because every ending is the silent beginning of a new thought. And every beginning opens up space for a person to know themselves a little more deeply.